The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
That's the best thing about being an Episcopalian, isn't it? Nobody else gets the joke. What's really bad is when you're in the movies and somebody says, may the fourth be with you, and we all say, and also with you, or crossing yourself at the end of the national, and not the Pledge of Allegiance and stuff like that. You can always tell they're either Catholic or Episcopalians when we do that. Go ahead and get started, John.
Okay. Well, should we begin with prayer? Let us begin with prayer together as we are called into this space to talk about sharing our faith out into the world. Let us pray. I will pray first and then invite Father Devin to pray as well. O holy God, you who created us not only to enjoy this world and to know the beauty of your love, have also called us to make that love known, not necessarily with words, but through our actions. For you are the God who loves, reigns, and lives with your Son, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And my name is John Caleb. I go by my first and middle name. My name is John Caleb, and my pronouns are he, him, and them. And I am the vicar at St. John's Church in Bisbee and at St. Stephen's Church in Douglas, as well as the Cochise County border missioner. So I'm divided in three spots. And when Bishop Jennifer asked both myself and Father Devin to be present to facilitate this conversation about evangelism in the world, one of the things that Devin and I thought about was how the word cosmos, in the Greek in which our scriptures are written, refers not just to the universe like we think, but it actually can refer to the world or to everybody in the world. And so when we say we share the love of God with the cosmos, we're saying we share the love of God with nature, with the universe, with our creation care, with the world, and with people in the world. And so that covers a whole breadth of things. And my inspiration to be present and to help facilitate with my wonderful colleague, Father Devin, to whom, by the way, the credit goes for the bingo cards. He made the bingo cards. So he gets that credit. I really thought about how, as a border missioner in 2 congregations in southern Arizona, my call is, in a way, as all of us is, to be subversive and transgressive. And what I mean by that is when we hear the word evangelism, it has gotten such an icky feeling sometimes about it because we connect that with bullying people to agree with us, rather than going out into the world and loving people with actions and not necessarily words. Words are great too, but not necessarily words. And so to be in a space at the border, literally, I thought about how my call was not just to cross this border and to help us deconstruct our idea of the human family being more than just boundaries that we draw, boundaries that we imposed on this earth where God did not create those. On the 7th day, God did not create borders. So we are there to cross that. And as I thought, I reflected on how really my first task is not just to cross back and forth in that border, but to cross the borders that divide us everywhere, and to really deconstruct what it means to have a border. And really, that is a transgressive calling itself. So to me, evangelism, in a nutshell, very like the small version of this, is evangelism is daring to be transgressive and subversive enough to overcome borders among us, gender borders, borders of sexual orientation, borders of race, borders of language, borders of cities. That city's better than that city. And that is where a lot of our work is done, and bringing the many grains of Christ into one bread. And so that is why I am present here today, and that's my introduction.
Hi, I'm Dev. That's it. Most of you, if you've been on a Zoom meeting with the Diocese, you'll see Dev the Rev. That's me. Just to make sure everybody's comfortable here, are you okay with me pulling this thing down while we're talking, that we're far away? Okay, thank you. I've been here working on the other there. So, what do you want to get out of today? What are we here to talk about? Throw out some stuff. Let's hear them. New. New info. Okay. What kind of new info? On evangelism. Okay, that's a good place. What is evangelism? What do you think evangelism is? What does it look like to you?
Scary.
Scary? Proselytizing, yes. Pressure.
I'm having issues already because I'm having a lot of prejudice and bigotry about the word evangelism. To me, it's spread the good news, and yes, it can be bullying, it can be those things, but it seems we were starting from a place of prejudice.
That's exactly the problem with evangelism. People have prejudices about it. So we've named it now, right? We've talked about the fears. Yes?
I actually think when I talk about evangelism or I think about kindness. And John referred to it as our behavior more than a thought. You know, when you think of your background, if you've been raised in a different country, and don't take one look at me and think that I was raised in a super foreign country. I was raised in Canada.
That's not super foreign?
Well, it was 40 years ago before we came over here. But, you know, that's it. You kind of just get to know the personality, and you greet everyone, no matter how they greet you, with kindness. My husband says to me, well, who would have a best friend today? Because if I stand in a grocery line, I'm not to talk to you because I like the potatoes you got in your car. I mean, I think people just need a smile and a nod. And it comes from your own personality, whatever kindness means to you. You will be evangelizing.
Yes, and thank you for pointing it out, because that's exactly where I was going with it. We have, especially in rural America, which a lot of us in this room are from rural areas of the diocese, we have a different view of what evangelism is because of what we've experienced in other denominations. And that's not who we are. And we want to demystify what evangelism is and get rid of these scary, these proselytizing pressure type things, and understand that it is exactly this sort of thing. So in front of you, you have a bingo card. These are ways that we just thought of, different places that people don't think of going to evangelize. So let's take a look real quick at that and just mark the ones that you go to, that you experience. And if you need a pen, I've got pens here with cool styluses on the end. Okay, so take a minute and look at those.
And while they're,
go ahead.
Say, if I may have a moment,
Go
okay?
ahead.
While you're doing that, I wanted to share one that just came today. Our senior warden, he gave me permission to share this, talking about where in moments of our lives we engage evangelism and share the good news of Christ. He said, Nelson Hall said, he was without a car for a while, so he would hitchhike to church. And I thought that's a method of evangelism I hadn't heard of. So what Father Devin and I are really, what we talked about a lot was we listed this too, to come up with this list. And so we're thinking, wow, these are all these places we've been to, and I think we'll be amazed at where we end up.
So just a minute to look over those. Are there any on there that surprise you that you never thought of?
Yeah, car wash.
Car wash? Yeah. Where I'm from, genealogy circles are big, no matter what denomination you are. We actually have a genealogy library in my town.
Well, I think of my grandfather. He was from a small town, and they had a lot of archives and a lot of genealogy resources. So I thought of that. I'm like, I don't have that where I live.
What other places on there that you never thought of before?
Tattoo shops.
I actually have Bible study in a tattoo shop. Yeah, I go anytime, and everybody knows that, and I let everybody know when I'm scheduling my next piece of work, the tattoo artist lets people know, or I let other people know, and I take my prayer book, I take whatever resources I'm using, and I work on my sermons there in the tattoo chair, like this sometimes, with other people sitting around that aren't even there for a tattoo. And we talk and we share the gospel, different denominations. So tattoo shop, yeah. In fact, I've got some tattoos I never intended because I'm in there to have Bible study, and I'm like, might as well.
But if tattoos are not for you because, like me, you're scared of the needles, a coffee shop works great. So,
What other ones are jumping out at you that you never thought of before?
Dog parks.
Dog parks.
those are huge in Bisbee. We have a dog park, and pet culture in Bisbee is like a huge thing. So that's one where I think Father Devin, you mentioned that as well for your area, that dog parks are a major place where people commune and gather together.
When it comes to things like animals, stop and think about something. Are you aware there's a liturgy for the loss of a pet, that there's actually what we would call a last rites for a pet? I have been called to the local vet to do service for a pet because I was there when I had to let a couple of mine go, and I went in with that and I prayed for it. And the local vet in my town is actually the pastor of an evangelical church in my town, and said, I'd never seen that before. Do you mind if we ever call you? And I said, bring it on. So I will get periodically called over for somebody for that. But a lot of people don't realize that we can do that. And that's an evangelism. What ideas? Let's list some that these are sparking that are not on there that you guys have never thought of before.
Well, I was just listening to Christian radio the other day, and I'm just going to put regular shopping supplies up, or it was Target, honestly.
Okay, Target.
I heard. And it's like, all they're doing is action. Someone walked in and they had a working dog and they were blind. And this person just went up and, the dog can't breathe. What kind of change does it need? So this lady walked up and said, how can I help you with the use of your dog? And it was a feature story that they did.
Oh.
So,
Great. And we have, sorry, sir.
What's that?
I'm sorry, while driving?
Dollar store.
While driving. And then you said dollar store?
Driving and dollar store. Dollar store. Okay, how about this?
Really quick, let's say our names when we call. No, you're fine, Joe. I see your name. We want to respect everyone's name when we call. So share your name with us if we can't see it, and share your name so we know who you are. And so this space actually is evangelism because we're sharing the gospel. So
Yes.
I didn't think of this before, but these other sharing. My name is Patty, and during the pandemic, my husband and I go out to the trailheads out in North Scottsdale, and we the horses and the dogs that we see, besides the people. But I didn't think of
Hi, Annette. We're talking about places we've been that we
Yeah.
might do
So
evangelism.
how about hiking?
And
How's
here's,
that?
a pen for you. Okay.
Has anybody ever thought of, go ahead. Have you ever thought of silence as evangelism? Nobody ever thinks of that one. And I'll tell you what I mean by that, if I can spell. Silence as evangelism. Listening to somebody with what we call holy listening, without trying to convert, without trying to proselytize, without trying to fix anything, that is huge.
W-H-O-L-L-Y, right?
Yes. Holy, L-L-Y, holy listening. Holy listening. Holding holy space for someone holy. Being present. We don't think of silence, but that's a kindness. When somebody comes to you and says, I love Nadia Boltz-Weber. She's my spirit animal. And when somebody comes in and says, I'm going through this tough place in my life, and somebody, usually Christian, goes in with an answer for them, and she says, when God closes the door, he opens a window. And you want to say, show me where the window is so I can push you out of it. Whereas that silence, that loving, caring, present silence, speaks volumes from the heart to that person. So I'll have somebody come in and say, Devin, I'm going through this thing here. And I say, there's nothing I can say that's going to make you feel better. Let me sit here and hold your hand. Yes?
my name's Audrey. I'm from St. James, just up the street in Tempe, or down the street. I'm real horrible at shutting up and actively listening. I'm working on that. And one of the things I would add to that is 1, 2, 3 before you say anything, or practicing patience while you're doing your listening and being quiet.
Yes.
Okay, I'm Susan. One place that I was surprised, and
family. Why would we want them?
Yeah.
I have 9 brothers and 3 sisters. And we grew up in a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom house.
And Susie? Susie?
So I see hospital is on this list. So I immediately went to when I visit people in the hospital. But I was actually a patient in the hospital a few weeks ago. And it was an interesting turnabout by being the patient and my interaction with the staff and how grateful I was and how I appreciated the work that all of those people that work in the hospital do. It just turned the tables for me personally. That I was so grateful, and I expressed that. Now, you might not think of that directly, but I think being that kind presence, that appreciative presence, that is the presence of God.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Thank you for that. Somebody had something over here?
Well, while we think, because I know we probably need to digest and think some more too, and we're Episcopalians, so we're not used to shouting out answers, in church. But except for in Bisbee and Douglas, we do sometimes. But one of the things I was going to ask is, can we think of places where the words of St. Francis of Assisi might apply, that we should always share Christ? I'm paraphrasing. We should always share Christ. When necessary, we should use words. And I wanted to ask, are there places, I'll use me as an example because I'm not going to pick on anyone else. There is a place where I fall short often in loving my neighbor, and it is really easy to talk too much in this space. And it's not necessarily verbal. It can be typing, writing. Where are some spaces where we might need to talk less and love more?
Social media.
Yes, social media.
I'm going to put that one on this side. Social media. It's not meant to be a dollar sign.
Though it could be. Though it could be.
Okay. Where else could we do better?
Yes, Dottie.
While visiting hospital patients or shut-in, or someone in a nursing facility where they are alone, they have no other visitors.
Yeah.
And Robert.
Prison.
And Matt.
When young people sound radical to you.
Oh, yes, let's put oral, yeah, well, yes. Maybe put age. Just put age. Because age is like I said, evangelism in my mind, okay, this is my word, is transgressive, not in a bad way. For me, to be subversive like Jesus was is a good thing. Jesus standing in the way of people being put to death for an alleged sin, that is Jesus intervening and doing something. That's Jesus being subversive. Jesus rising from the grave when he was supposed to die, I can't think of anything more subversive than telling death no at the end. So age is something I do experience frequently among us, not one way or the other. I mean, everybody, that's a border we have to cross, and it's a border that exists in the church.
Take a second. Yes, go ahead.
I'm Kathy from Vincent. When we march, we're not making noise, but we're showing up in force and we're having a huge statement. So, marching for a cause.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's put that over here.
Maybe activism in general?
Activism.
Yeah, activism spaces.
2 things I want to add to what was said here in a couple places. And they're great things that I'm hearing, is about the, like when you said about prisons. We go to places and there's a moment's silence and we get uncomfortable in the silence, and so we fill it instead of letting the person we are there to minister to fill that. We don't have to have the answers to be present for somebody. Now, the next thing I wanted to bring up is all these ideas are coming. You've heard how many are coming. And when we started with demystifying evangelism. Do you realize how you're all evangelizing every moment of your interactions out the day, and you just didn't realize you were doing it? You are evangelizing. You just didn't realize that's what you were doing. So how scary is it now to see your evangelism? We just demystified it. Evangelism is life for the person walking with Christ. Evangelism is life in general, when you look at it right. You had something to say. Driving.
Driving, yes.
How many of you have people that, bringing up driving, how many of you have people that don't make it to church because there's nobody there to get them there, and you could have stopped on your way and picked them up?
Yes. Or bring church to them.
Or bring church to them, yeah.
In Old Bisbee, it's really difficult to move around. It was built well before there was any rights for the differently abled, and so it's a very ableist area, not by intent, but that's just the way it was built. And so we have folks that our lay Eucharistic ministers and myself will go around and bring the Eucharist, bring the body and blood of Christ to them. And so, like Devin said, it's important to not forget our friends and Christ who need that.
So let's look at something else about what church looks like outside the church walls. Pandemic happened. Here we are.
Uh-oh.
Thank you. Does anybody want to search the web for evangelism? So, taking church out into the world. Believe me, I love being in my church. Sometimes I go to my church just to be alone there and spend my quiet time because we forget something else too. Evangelism to yourself. Do you ever stop and think that you need your own evangelism as much as the rest of the world does? You need these things we've talked about as well? Yes?
I'm Nancy, and when someone said driving, my immediate thought was, when I talk to other people and they do bad things over it.
Did you pass me this morning?
And I spoke to you.
She was probably the reason I have 5 cracks in my window this morning. But yes, we don't stop to think about evangelism to ourselves because it has to start at home. You can't fill from an empty cup. That might be reading a book. It might be spending time in your garden, or like me, I have a white wolf and we wrestle on the floor together, and that is my connection to God sometimes because he brings me such joy, just like getting tattoos. So evangelism on the next step is, what does church looks like outside the church? I heard a priest one time that we were interviewing at the congregation I was in one time, and we were trying to get out into the community, and we asked, one of the questions was, what do you want to do outside in the community? They said, nothing. It needs to all be brought back to the church. Bible study needs to be here. We need to do this, and it all had to be back at the church. And there's great things about doing stuff at the church. But like I said, I hold Bible study sometimes at the tattoo shop. I have a great mentor when I was going through formation. We would go out to dinner, and I had to get very comfortable. And believe it or not, I'm an absolute introvert. I know that's hard to believe. But we would go out to dinner, and this priest would sit down, and we would be talking just like we're talking, and sitting down at our table, and you take this side, you take this side, and without skipping a beat, this priest takes a piece of paper and a piece of tape and sticks it onto the end of the table and flops it down, and we just went about our way. And one day I looked over to see what was taped to the end of our table, and it said free prayer. Another time it was free confession. And we did. We did that. People would come up. I was out with another priest here at one of the conventions, and I had learned to do this. So we went out to TGI Fridays, and I did this. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Don't worry about it." And so eventually people started coming up saying, "Father, can you pray for me?" "Sure." And eventually he looked at the end of the table and realized I'd put up a sign that said free prayer. Yes, did you have to?
I'm part of the church plant in Surprise. My name's Kathy.
Yes, Kat.
We were renting some space from a Lutheran church that closed as the pandemic hit. How convenient. We took it all online. Everybody else, but we adapted very quickly to Zoom. We do counseling at night on Facebook Live. We have members of our church who have moved away over the last couple of years who still join us for community online twice a week right now. We used to go daily, and everybody was stuck at home because it allowed us to maintain our community. Make your coffee, make your tea, and log on. But that was huge, and I think being so flexible and small helped. But we've
Right.
who fear this evangelist, type of word. And that's why I was really interested to be here today and get some ideas of how to get away from that
Yes.
word.
Have you seen how we've taken this word evangelism and flipped it upside down? It's still evangelism, but it's starting to look very different than what we thought evangelism is. Now, taking a quick check-in, how many of you are still scared of it? And it's okay. I'm not going to be offended.
It's okay. I'm raising my hand because I still get scared. Okay, so you can raise your hand.
raise
It's
your
okay, and you don't have to if you don't want to. But
It's not being scared. Frankly, it turns me off.
Turns you off.
I really have a negative connotation with that.
that word.
And I think it's within the last few years. And I think it's highly, and that's why I want to see this session. I want to see it.
Yes.
See if.
Hi, my name is Sam.
Hi, Sam.
I work with a lot of people that are Jewish, Muslim, whatever, maybe nothing at all. And so I get confused by this word evangelism because my job is to love them. Just love them.
Yeah.
And-
So,
yeah.
go ahead.
Part of the guiding line that we use is, do you want me to just listen?
That's
Or are you asking for feedback?
That's a good place.
That's very good too. Yeah.
What if we took the word evangelism and changed it to share your story? What if that's what we are doing, is sharing our story? How about if we called evangelism listening to someone's story?
Well, and that's actually a good thing. Let's see if we want. Father Devin, do we still want to have people kind of talk in the little sections?
I don't think we...
Well, let's go ahead and do this
it
then,
wouldn't.
because we didn't know exactly how the room would look, so we're trying to be adaptable as we are. Well, why not then invite other definitions? What if we were to take the word evangelism, which just means to share the good news, who is Jesus? What if we were to take that and how else can we be Jesus? How else can we share Jesus? Maybe any other want to raise our hands and give other definitions for?
One of the reasons I've always seen evangelism as something scary is I'm not very well educated in the actual Bible. For example, I can't go quote scriptures, and I can't, when somebody asks me what does this mean or how do you interpret it, that, I'm like, whoa, I don't know how to respond to something like that. So I would say evangelism is education, not just about learning and understanding the Bible, but understanding. So it goes in line with all that.
Come on in.
Right. So then that begs the question, did we get called to preach, or did we get called to evangelize?
And that's where my scariness of about evangelism comes in, because I hear that word and I think prime religion, and I don't care what religion, down comes first. And I'm like, no, I want to be respectful, listen,
We're talking.
share, and have
We're talking about evangelism and different spaces where we might share it. So, right now we're talking.
I want
about
to
if we were
ask you a
change the
question.
word
Is that okay?
evangelism,
So
what-
when we
what
first
other
started, you were
definition
saying
would we
about the negative connotation, having that triggering there. But you don't have that, and it sounds like you don't either. Where did you not get
You
that
could sit
from?
here if you want.
Does that make sense?
Sure. No, that's a good question.
Oh, okay.
I work in a hospital chaplain. And a lot of my patients are evangelicals. I think, but they don't scare me. I look at it more like music or movies. I have certain kinds of music I like and some I don't. That doesn't make it bad music, it's just not my taste.
Right.
I am not from the evangelical tradition, but I work. Several of the other chaplains are evangelical. The fastest way to get fired as a hospital chaplain is to proselytize. And I think we've equated being evangelical with proselytizing. And I have learned that they're not the same.
That's right. Yes.
Exactly.
So I'm not, I like to evangelize, but I'm not an evangelical.
Yes.
Right. And that's where it comes down to changing the definition of what evangelism is.
And then we had Robert, and then Patty.
I think it's part of life.
Part being okay.
That, people call me
I
all
can
the
do
time
this,
and tell me their stories about life.
Yeah.
And what's going on. Like today, for an example, there's you know, that's part of it. I just listen to her, and I feel that when I get back home in Bisbee, I want to go talk to some people about her problems in life. And it's all about a job, you know, and it's something that has, people in Bisbee are all new people. And they're trying to change everything here. So, it's like, they can't get along.
Okay, being a part of life, and that's pretty hard sometimes.
Yes.
I always equated evangelical with Bible flipping.
Bible thumping.
And then we became linked to the Evangelical Church of the Lutheran. Our Benson is a combined church congregation, Episcopal and ELCA. And I began to realize that that was the liberal side of the Lutheran tradition. And it's changed my idea about evangelicalism entirely.
That's great
But
because...
go ahead, I'm sorry. What I'm hearing, and tell me if I'm wrong, please, is that it took engaging with others different from you to get rid of that. So let me jump real quickly into this thing about evangelical verses. Short window into my past. I grew up in small backwoods Arizona, went through Christian education. Small c, intentional, because it was far from Christian. My parents pulled me out of public school because the bullying was so bad that they didn't know what to do with me. So they put me in Christian school, and the teachers became the bullies, not the students. To graduate from high school, I had to submit to an exorcism to make me straight. Do you think God and I spoke to each other for very long after that? We did not have a very good relationship. Look where I'm at now. And it took other people, it was actually the Episcopal Church, that broke that idea of what evangelical versus evangelism was. That it was okay to be in relationship with God and be different.
Places we might evangelize, but what
And
evangelism
that's
may mean to us.
what is problematic with this idea of evangelical equating to evangelism. They are not the same thing. So it's just a word. It's only a word. Let's replace that word with something else. Yes, Deborah.
Deborah, Tucson. One problem I have is with non-Christians who assume that all Christians are evangelical, being evangelicals. And so I feel defensive and put upon, no, I'm not that, you know, but I feel like I'm starting way behind the starting line or something, because that as Christians to non-Christians, and maybe that means we let some other people who don't know shit define the word evangelical.
And are you going to? And thank you for putting it out there. I just told you, and I'm going to relate this right there. I just told you my story. Now, if you went out to talk to somebody about the gospel, about Christ, about church, inviting them to church, and they came back with the story I just told you, well, this is what happened to me, how would you respond? Here first, then there.
My name's Bob. How would I respond to that? Are you still in those shoes back there?
Good response. Let's hear this one.
I would say, yes, my name's Audrey. What would you like for me to do? How can I help? And then do my best to provide.
That's a good way too. Yes.
I would try to convey that your experience is not what Jesus taught.
I'm hearing different versions of the same thing. How about something like, I'm sorry that happened to you. You must be devastating. Tell me about your experience. Yes.
I would agree with what you're saying here. I believe that to show my Christian spirit to somebody and to show the kindness, I don't say the word Jesus. I don't say the word God or Christ. That's all here. But somebody who doesn't believe, like this lady was telling us, talking to somebody, you got to get rid of those words. Because words are a barrier. You just need to show it how you care about how Jesus would want us to be. And I don't even use the word Jesus, for myself. I said, just do it.
Yes. Patty.
Yes, about a month ago,
young ladies came in, and one of our deacons were there, and they came in, and they were a little late, and they said, the one thing we want to know for sure, if this is an LGBTQ-friendly church. And both the deacon and I said, this church welcomes everybody with love. Well, this young lady has not missed a Saturday service. She has gone and spoke with our pastor and with our deacon, and if she could jump up and down and say, hallelujah, I finally found a place that loved me, she would have done that in the middle of the church.
You told my story 25 years ago.
Yeah.
That was me 25 years ago. Yes.
How did you find the Episcopal Church?
She found us online.
No, thank Devin. I mean,
Okay.
to me, like, I would not have, in your place, I would never have gotten near a church.
Well, I was a school teacher. I was the orchestra director for Safford High School for 5 years. The people who write the paychecks found out I was gay, and I was fired on the spot, and I was escorted out of the campus by security. I didn't know what else to do, so I was at a Tai Chi class. Some of you on there have Tai Chi class on your little card. And this little lady about this big with a white bob haircut was in there. And she walked over to me, because I'm in a small community, everybody knows, and she says, I hear you're out of the closet. And I said, yes. And she says, and I hear every church in town uninvited you. And I said, yes, and that was true. We have a ministerial association. And they had gone and spread the word at the ministerial association, this guy's out of the closet, don't let him through the doors. And she came over to me and she said, is that true? And I said, yes. And she went, I guess I could say it, horseshit. I expect to see you in my congregation on Sunday. I'm the Reverend Eugenia Durham. And she was an Episcopal priest. And I went the first time, and I walked in, and they handed me a red book and a blue book and an order of service. And I'm sitting at the back, and I'm going, and so an elderly gentleman whose mother founded the congregation came and sat next to me, and he said, I'll be here with you through this. My name's Bill. And we started through the service, and he would help me turn the pages and go juggle this book and that. So we have since gone to a single order of service, all-inclusive. And there was just so much I don't care there about who I had identified myself as that I stayed, and I kept coming Sunday after Sunday, and I went from the back pew up to the front. And there was a lady that sat next to me eventually when I got up to that front pew with a really badly fitting wig, and she was a wonderful lady, and she would turn and it would stay. And I'm sitting there, and everybody would get up for communion, and I would get down on my knees, and I would just pray, and I would hold my eyes closed tightly there at that, and it was in the front row, and I'm just praying, and I would hear the rustle as everybody went up. Well, one day she comes back to me after about a year, and she said, I noticed you don't take communion with us. Why is that? And I said, because I'm gay. And she went, horseshit. I expect to see you up there next Sunday. And I went, okay. So next Sunday came along, and hopefully I won't get choked up because it does something to me whenever I tell this story. And so next Sunday came, and I got down to pray, and I heard all the rustling as everybody got up. And I still to this day can't tell you, because I don't know, and nobody will clarify in the congregation for me, if she planned this or if it just happened. And I wouldn't be surprised either way. And I opened my eyes, and I looked up, and Gretchen, the lady with the wig, was standing next to me. And the whole congregation was in a line behind her. Nobody had gone forward. And she looked at me and she said, after you. And I looked up, and Reverend Eugenia's up there with her chasuble and her paten, and she said, so I got up and I went over there and I knelt down at the altar rail, and she said, put your hands out. And I put my hands out, and she grabbed one and did this. And she put the bread in my hand, and she said, now eat it. So I went like this, and she said, the body of Christ, the bread of heaven. And the chalice came around, and I sipped from the chalice, and the tears flowed because I had found home. Because not just one person welcomed me, that whole congregation stood in line and waited for me, little old me. And just to jump forward, many years later, I expressed to Eugenia that, I feel the calling to ministry. I thought about being a priest, and she said, why haven't you? You can hear it coming. And I said, well, because I'm gay. And she went, horseshit. And we talked about it and began my journey. But you see, what happened is she took evangelism and she flipped it on its head. And that whole little congregation in the far out reaches of Arizona did the same thing. And every one of you has the power to do that very same thing. Remember this, what is evangelism? Share your story. Listen to someone. Educate them. Become part of their life. Search for your identity along with them.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Nancy from Sierra Vista, and I will use horse shit much more freely.
So what you're saying is evangelism is great for horseback?
It can be. You know, we tease Heather because Heather's my buddy here. And she goes like we do out in the small rural communities. You get out into your community, especially your clergy. And the other day she says, okay, after lunch today, I've got to get back. I've got to go to pray for the bull riding? Yes. And I said, are you going to bless it? Because Heather, her middle name is Blessed. If she's been called out to bless rose bushes, water fountains, what else have you done? The artwork. If there's a chance for Heather to be out in her community blessing something, she would. Why aren't you? Church is great. Sometimes, and what you're hearing from me mainly, no, I mean, not that he's not telling you, but what you're hearing in my story, sorry, that sounded horrible. What you're hearing in my story is taking the church out of church and the churchiness out of church when you're out of the church.
Yeah. And I think that leads to the next, a really good part. We had planned for small groups. One of the other, kind of mini breakouts was going to be after we looked at these bingo cards and did this and reflected back what we gathered from it. How are ways you can be the church in some of these spaces, like our brother in Christ, Devin, has mentioned, being present like our sister in Christ, Mother Heather, is at blessing the bull riding or the cattle farm or we have a chili farm in the Diocese of Arizona at Transfiguration. They do a great work there. What about the coffee shops? We go to the grocery store. Maybe if we are at home and we all have different abilities. So wherever our ability takes us, if that's at home on the phone, what are some ways you can be the church in that space? What are your ideas about being the church in that space? What does it look like to you to be in the coffee shop or the movie theater and be the church and share Christ? Can you write up for?
Anybody? Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. Here's this view, and here's a pen, and it's not one of ours. And if you want to sit with Nelson, I'll get her one too. Okay, and we're talking right now about, right now the question is, how can you be the church in like a place like these? So if you want to get involved and raise your hand, it's how can we, like if you were in one of these places, how would you be the church?
I know I don't show up, online and join some service, but I think it starts the conversation, it opens the door, that's the whole community. It keeps so many conversations coming before they'll even, engage in something. How much so?
Yes. Other ideas? I saw some other hands. Yes.
I don't know if this exactly answers your question, but I would go through it from the aspect of accept a challenge, because I think that's a two-way challenge. It's a challenge for the person you're trying to bring to Christ, and for me, it's that challenge of dealing with what I would call my own fear and trust. And so accepting a challenge that I can believe I can do this, and that, yes, it's going to be challenging, but the reason I'm doing it is for that person.
Yes. There was somebody over here first. Okay, Kathy?
I still have trouble with me engaging somebody probably in a conversation, but we've been doing St. Teresa's prayer at church during creation season. I am the hands of Christ on earth. I am the feet of Christ. My tongue is the tongue of Christ on church, of Christ on earth. And I just keep trying to, if I see something that needs to be done, I try to step in and do
So you hit on something very key there. It's the starting of the conversation. And that gets to be very scary when we're trying to share our story or get other people to engage in their stories. Is that a fair statement to say? So let's play a real quick little game here. I have a secret. Guess it. What's that? Try and get my secret out.
Share your secret. Share it from Sierra Vista.
Both good ways of doing that.
What's your secret's name?
Well, this one doesn't. The one I had in mind it doesn't actually have a name, but along the same line. I play the harp.
I think it's great. I think it was kind of all three of the Sierra Vista folks. I couldn't hear who said it first, so I'll say Sierra Vista said, "Can you tell us your secret?" And that is a beautiful thing, because what Devin did was just said, "I have something on my mind," and what you did was to actively listen by inviting him with an open question. Can you share your secret? So I think that's good.
Well, I'm just using that as an example, but about how to start conversation, getting other people to talk about their story.
Over here, the one sitting in the back, I don't know. You know, he started telling us about having conversation with people and asking things without even thinking about evangelizing. And I think more and more, you know, to share a story, that's a great start.
Yes.
Right.
You don't have to be thinking.
You don't.
You don't.
So, I think Patty and Audrey.
About, well, I have a secret too, in response to your question. I don't know if you heard her, but that brought something up, which is, I'm going to call it validation. And how when somebody is in an uncomfortable situation, no matter what side of the evangelism they're on, validating where somebody's at and you brought it up before can really sort of, to the person you're trying to educate, if you will, or evangelize, or all that.
Right.
And then, so I think we have Nancy, Dottie, and then Robert. Okay,
And
Nancy.
then,
Thank you for Sierra Vista. I had a personal revelation a few years back that I had choice in my actions. You know, I was brought up in the 50s. I was taught that I was supposed to do what other people told me. I was taught to be nice and to, you know, not make a choice because other people had more important choices than I did. And it finally dawned on me that I had a choice. And that the biggest choice that I have is that I don't have to do what other people tell me. I can walk away. So when I talk to people and they come to me, I'm in real estate, and they have problems, and they need solutions. I ask them what they want to choose, and to encourage them that they have choice, that there are solutions that are outside of the normal path or what they think they should do, and that that's the way I evangelize, by listening to what they're saying and encouraging them to take their own life in their hands and make choices.
one way of looking at it. Yes, you had the names.
Oh, yes. There was Dottie, Robert, and then I think someone else over here,
Over
too.
here.
Okay, so Dottie.
A few years ago, I was reading a book because it was in preparation of being in a discernment, or part of a discernment committee for somebody in our church. Well, the book was on one of my living room tables there, and a neighbor had come over, and we sat down, and he just happened to sit, you know, in the chair next to this. He picked up the book and he goes, "Listening hard. What is this?" So I said, "Well, it's a book," and you know, I told him what it was about. And he said, "Oh." He said, "Well, what is the discernment all about?" So told him what it was about. And he said, "Can I borrow that when you're done?" I said, "Okay." So when I was finished with it, I gave it to him to read, and he went back to his church, which is not Episcopal, is another denomination, and he was showing it to some of the people in his church that he was real friendly with, And they decided that maybe they could use this kind of thing to raise up leaders in their church, not necessarily, clerical, but some lay
Here,
leaders.
I'll get it for you. You got it? Okay.
And they did. They ended up raising up new leaders. He gave me back the book. He ordered one for himself, and they've been using it in his church the whole time.
How many of you have an ECM class? I mean EFM. EFM.
Yeah, we do.
How many of you open it up to other denominations or other faith communities?
Yes, we did. I had Presbyterian, I had Methodist, as well as Episcopal, and I was mentoring.
Bible studies are the same way, things like that.
That's cool.
Who is it?
Robert.
Robert.
I want people that, you talk about God and they say, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God.
There was a great statement from a rabbi that says, he asked people, well, why don't you believe in God? And he told him, he gave him a description. He goes, you know the God that you don't believe in? I don't believe in that God either. And I've actually used that. And they're like, what?
And I'm sorry, the name? Susan. I'm sorry, yes, Susan.
I share a little bit. So I'm a hospice chaplain. And a lot of times people can't respond. And I usually know if they have a big background or not, and if so, what it is, but not always. Sometimes, family's not available and they just came in and so I read poetry, and there was this one gentleman who hand talked. He was terrified when he first came onto hospice that he was going to go straight to hell. Son of a very conservative pastor. His idea of God was that God was going to punish him for all the terrible things that he had done in his life. So with him, I just, I listened a lot, and I started reading poetry, some that I've written and some that is from other folks. I was actually, the last time I met with him, he was talking about how he was looking forward to seeing his parents in heaven.
Oh. Yes, comforter.
Wonderful. Yes, Matt.
So I just wanted to add one as a technique, and then second, just audience. So the first is, I think along our list, it's not, something unsacred about having it already listed out, but develop your own set of open-ended questions.
That's good. Yes, very good.
Your own set of kind of go-to open-ended questions that cannot be answered with yes or no.
Yes.
Why is that important? Tell me more about this. What's been the best part of your week? What's been the worst part of your week? Just develop open-ended questions. People love to talk when asked about them. They don't really know how much they love to give you the answer. And then in terms of audience, by profession, I work as a counselor with young kids. And frequently when we build resources with kids that are in significant crises, we're going to build a list of who they can talk to. And the list of adults in your life that can be emotionally attuned to where they're at this moment, just for this 10 minutes, is a lot smaller than you think. And I think the general attitude of the people in this room to take time on a Friday afternoon and the wonderful weather of October tells me you're the type of people who would listen to a young person that just needs to talk about their life with an adult who's just going to show them love by listening, by eye contact. And so that's my plug. There's millions of kids in our community that have been really suffering because of COVID and detachment and connection. And now they're just coming to grips with what that feels like because part of their youth, part of their experience has been ripped away. So one's technique and one is a plug for an audience, not yet.
You bring up something here. How many school teachers do we have in this room? I was one. And, well, at some point in your life, yeah. As a teacher, you will learn very quickly that sometimes there are 3 parents for that child, mom, dad, and you. Sometimes there's only 2 parents, that one parent and you, and sometimes you're the only parent to that child. Never forget the sacredness of that and the evangelism that takes place. What you might not have gathered, and I'm hoping that we get out of this, is we don't have the answers, you do. You've heard each other's answers. You've heard the answers coming out of you today. You know how to evangelize. You just didn't realize you were doing it. You have evangelized me today. You have evangelized each other today. You got this.
And on that, what is the number one? So I think maybe we should go here first before that question. But so some of the examples that we have from how can you be, remember the verb to be the body of Christ, and you all said, accept a challenge, I summarized, accept a challenge to just be there. If going to the movies is not your, and smiling or saying hi is not your comfort zone, then just being there, that's accepting a challenge. Be a helper, ask open-ended questions, asking others about their stories, listening, validate people, let them know, eye contact, that you are hearing them. Ask yourself reflective questions, be a comforter, recognizing others, such as Matt shared the example of the teens or children who no one has recognized. They have a story to tell. Reading in personal growth, because you'd be surprised at how many times people just want to talk to you because you're reading a book, and apparently no one can let you finish it because they have to come up and talk, right? But that's right there, you did that. And self-care, share, and be a supportive listener. That's all came from here.
From you guys. You guys know how to do this. You just didn't realize you know how to do this. Now, do we have that level of discomfort with the idea of evangelism coming down here and the comfort setting in about it? I thought of something while he was talking about validating. I had somebody come to me because we are also streaming, just like about every other church in the diocese. We got part of the UTO grant, and some of you will see me in that other workshop today. And the person came to me because I've been running that as my order of service. I'm up there doing all of this with the Mevo and with the iPad in my hand, manning the camera. And somebody came to me and said, I'd like to do that. And I'm like, great! And now I have somebody that is running my camera, and when the organist can't be there, we have the downloaded music, and she goes in and she does this for us, and she runs the music and she runs the camera. She's 8 years old. She is 8 years old. Kelsey came in with her grandmother and said, I'd like to do that. And I said, okay, here's your primer, 5 minutes before the service. And she did it. And that's what she does in our congregation, an 8-year-old. And I posted a picture to my deanery Facebook page of Kelsey sitting there in her chair with her stuffed pink sloth and the iPad running the cameras and the music. How do you think that would have looked for the next generation of people in the church if I had said, no, you're too young? Remember that ageism thing?
Yep, and that's important.
Nobody's too young, nobody's too old for any sort of involvement with the body of Christ.
And on that, so, Father Devin has talked to us about invitation and then the participation that comes from that. One of the number one reasons for church growth, which is rare, by the way, we have to acknowledge that, church growth has either stagnated or declined across denominations. You want statistics, come ask me, because I have collected them to show people it's not just the Episcopal Church. You'll hear that, like, well, your church doesn't do this or this. There is no secret sauce, because that's the culture we are in, is there's less engagement. So invitation leads to participation. The number one reason people do come to church is because somebody invited them. Somebody invited them. So we talked about sort of de-scarifying, deconstructing what evangelism has been told to us by others and looking that evangelism is a good thing. Like our brother in Christ, Joe, said, that evangelism is a good thing and we have to deconstruct the prejudice. So one story of that that's similar is at our church in Douglas. We invite, pretty much because we have to, I know some altar guilds might just stare at me, but we only have a small congregation, so during service, I say, who would like to come be the chalice bearer? Now, that's right, sometimes we're thinking, you didn't have that planned? We don't always know who's going to come. But now on Sundays, there's a young lady who celebrated her quinceañera, and she comes up every Sunday she's there, and she had never done that before. And her family at that quinceañera, her younger nephews, nieces, and cousins came up, and they really wanted to see the altar. And their parents, like how Devin said, they were very scared about their children touching the altar. They said, oh, don't touch that. That's holy. The priest might be upset. And I said, no, come on up. What do you want to see? And they asked questions, and they all asked good questions. And it started with one little child said, well, what do you do here? And they had just been there. So I said, well, what we just did, we have that bread and the wine, and we say Jesus is present there with us. And another kid said, well, what does that look like? And I said, well, when you go home, whatever your home is, and so to be inclusive, I just said where you gather with your family to share food. That is what this is we're sharing the presence of Christ. And one of the children, a little older, said, so it's like Thanksgiving. And that's what Eucharist means. And I can promise you that this little child did not have his Kina Greek class, okay? So like Devin said, with the 8-year-old who says, oh, I can do all this, or these little 12, 10-year-olds who come, it's invitation. And that doesn't mean we go out and we say, you're going to go to wherever bad place if you don't come to our special building. It is, if you're comfortable and you know someone would like to come, invite them.
Be creative. Like he was saying about, and we were talking about the children, and I love the involvement of children. We have, you know, the altar bell. I'm a little bit more high church in my spirituality, but trying to get somebody to ring the altar chime at the elevation at the right time every time. So I took the chime and I put it behind the altar, and I went to the local music store and I got a kick drum, you know, on the drum set. So when I do this, oh, chime goes. And everybody's wondering, where's the chime come from? And it happens at the right time. Imagine that. And the kids were looking around for it, and somebody saw my foot. And the kid goes around and sees and says, can I do that? I said, yes, you can. You can step on that all you want at the right time. Because the kids want to be involved. And if you don't think the children want to be involved, I will tell you, you are completely off base on that. I will call you out on that. We got rid of our cry room. When I took over, we did a little bit of remodeling, and I said, get rid of that room. And we took it out, and we put a soft space in for the kids. And sometimes people say, well, I'm afraid the kids are going to be too loud. And I said, that's okay. I can talk really loud. And I do, and I will talk over them. But I'll tell you this much, watching those kids, when it comes to things like the sermon, the readings, and especially the Eucharist, all eyes turn from whatever they're doing, and they are right there. Don't discredit the young people in your community as being welcome in the evangelism. Yes?
Yes.
We have a 4-year-old named Ella who's in charge of our stewardship.
And let's
Beautiful.
Let's go across that. You know, we have people who have been at our church since they were 25, and they have, you know, grown up in that church. But we also have people who have come to the Episcopal Church in many ages, whether they're 1 or they're 70 or they're 90. I mean, we had someone at St. John's who is in his 80s. He hadn't been back at the church since the 50s. It was the strangest conversation because I said, welcome. Have you been here, or you have been here before? I haven't met everybody. It's a weird thing to be a vicar in a year and a half and still not know everyone's face, okay? He said, oh, I was a member here, and I thought, oh gosh, I haven't met him yet. I'm trying to meet everybody. And he says, the last time I was here was the 1950s. You never know at what stage, 4, 5, 8, 85-year-old coming up, you know, and he said he felt called back to church. From the 1950s to now.
Let me throw this other idea out. Clifton, I have 2 congregations. They're an hour apart. I drive over to Clifton in the morning on Sunday, and I do a service there, and then I drive an hour back to Safford, and I do another Mass there. And up in Clifton, they don't have much, but they have an open mic night. Guess who got invited to open mic night? And I said, are you serious? And they're like, yeah, we've a couple of the people who invited me had been to church, and they said, we like your sermons. Would you come to open mic night? So I said, sure. I came back, and people found me on Facebook, and I have now what I call my digital confessional. And I will come home at night, and I will have Facebook messages open saying, can I talk? And I will run 5 or 6 windows there together back and forth and try to make sure I keep all the conversations straight. And then, but there's none of this, you need to come to church, you need to come to church, you need to come to church. It's, you need to talk, I'm here to listen. And we talk, and I've heard some amazing stories, and I feel so gifted by the holiness of the trust they have put in me in that. And now, guess what's happening? Those people are starting to filter into church just because somebody loved them and listened to them.
I was going to say, my takeaway from this morning is evangelism means hospitality.
Yes, hospitality. Evangelism means hospitality. Yes. So as we wrap up things, I know we want to get moving on here. Have we demystified? Yes, go ahead.
because we started doing things differently after COVID, like we started doing food drives that people could actually do. And then people in the neighborhood of our church said, oh, they're doing a food drive at St. Barnabas. We can do that. And without inviting them to church, they could do something that introduced them to our church that made them feel like they were making a difference in people's lives.
Let me translate that into another phrase. This is going to be one of my catchphrases. Thank you. You have a choice. You can be in the church or you can be the church. You can share Christ by being Christ to them. The Christ in me sees the Christ in you. Is that a fair statement to make? So let me just
do we want to just really quickly, does anyone else want to add, maybe if you haven't had a chance to speak yet, and you want to, of course, no, we're not going to call on anybody. Yes, Becky.
I was curious, sitting here, what the etymology of evangelism is, the word, what it means.
Good news. Evangelion, it means good news. And actually on that, the reason evangelical actually used to just mean, in the English, Protestant. So it came from the Reformed tradition, and so evangelical Lutheran is evangelisch, and that's what the church in Germany is called, for example. And so evangelion means the good news. Evangelism is like the sharing of good news. And to us as Christians, that's Jesus and his message. So that's the origin of it. And I think that's kind of what Joe was getting at the beginning was there's a barrier of prejudice because we've added to that word, but at its root, that's what it is.
Listening here, to me, it really means just making a connection.
Yes, making a connection. Beautiful statement. Yes.
My name is Jimmy. I'm from All Saints, Phoenix. I grew up in the South in the Southern Baptist Church, so I'm very familiar with evangelicals. I grew up in an evangelical family. I went to a Baptist college. And so the thing that I've learned in this journey that I've been on is so many people equate the political issues. And this is, I think, where so much of it gets confused because I've talked to people before, and when you start talking about your church and a place that you feel comfortable, thank goodness for the Episcopal Church, because I have told so many people, no matter what your history, no matter what your background is, you will be in a church that will love you and welcome you, no matter what. And so many people in the evangelical church, they don't really understand that. And so it's, trying to pull away from anything to do with political.
Yeah.
And that's been the thing that has always worked for me is remove the politics, remove political stuff, and just talk about being part of the body of Christ.
And
Yes.
Johnny, right? What? Oh, Mary?
Let me just say something real quick. I have people usually around that when it comes time for elections, each time they roll around, say, Father, how should I vote? And I say, what does the gospel say?
Good question. And that's actually what I was going to say.
What does the gospel say?
Devin and I are very much in sync. We talk a lot. We're friends outside of this too. And what I was going to say was actually very similar, that we are called to be involved in justice. And that can be, and what I hear you saying, is that Johnny? Am I saying, or Jimmy? Jimmy. What I hear you saying, Jimmy, is to take out the partisanship. This isn't Republican, Democrat, Green, and if we're in a different country, other parties. This is about justice. And so, like Devin said, what does the gospel say about this engagement we're doing? And I'll tell you, in St. Mark's Mesa, where my parents are members, my dad's a Republican and my mom's a Democrat. So they're my advisors when I ask them about how to bring people together because they've been married, about 25 years. And so, but I know we're getting close. And Devin, did you want to?
No, I just wanted to kind of sum up in the last few minutes. We started with questions. We started with fear. We started with discomfort and being out of sorts with this idea of evangelism. We started with trigger points about it. Where are we at now? Is it such a mystery? Do you realize how much evangelism you do? Again, we don't have the answers. You've heard you have the answers. Yes, David?
It seems like it's like breathing out and breathing in.
Mm-hmm. Funny thing, I was talking to somebody at evening prayer, Compline, on Wednesday at my congregation. We were doing a guided meditation thing afterward with some of the congregants. And you guys have ever heard of the Ham-Sa meditation? You breathe in and say hum, and you breathe out and say sa. And it's just a breathing exercise. That Ham-Sa means I am. You're actually, when you're breathing, saying the name of God. And it is exactly that sort of thing. So that's what I hope we take away here from each other. I know I will take away ideas that I've heard from you. The next time I'm out there doing ashes to go with my sign that says, get your ash over here. That's not a joke. Go to the All Saints website and you will, in Safford, and you will see I have a sign that I did with my thumb, and it says, get your ash over here. And All Saints is right next door to the bank, and there's a drive-through between them. Guess where I set up my ashes to go? In the drive-through of the bank, just on our side of the property line. So they go get their cash, they drive through, they roll the window down, and I do this. And I will take your ideas that you have shared so eloquently and beautiful, because they are all really wonderful ideas. And I hope you will take the ideas from each other and share those out as well, and realize that you got this.
Yes.
You got this. You know what you're doing. You just didn't realize it. And that's what we want to validate. Mm-hmm. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
By the way, I forgot to show this. Grab this. This is another idea I had. You guys have the bumper stickers that say the Episcopal Church welcomes you. I twisted the words around a little bit. Back up just a little bit. That was an idea. It's like, hey, you, the individual, where you're at. Thank you.